They say a single keystroke can change a life. For Victor Bowman, 20 years of blood and mud culminated in a clerk slipping on a 0, sending a Tier 1 shock trooper to a sector that didn't know what violence looked like. The unsuspecting galaxy didn't stand a chance. The shuttle doors hissed open, and the smell of jasmine and sanitized recycled air hit Victor Bowman like a physical blow. He stopped on the ramp, his heavy combat boots digging into the pristine, shock-absorbent polymer of the docking bay. He didn't move. He stood there, a slab of scarred muscle and synthetic bone, blocking the flow of disembarking passengers. His eyes, faded grey and surrounded by the deep ravines of premature aging, tracked every corner of the room. He checked the overhead gantries. Clear. He checked the maintenance hatches, locked and sealed. He looked at the locals waiting in the arrivals lounge. They were soft. That was the only word for it. There were humans in loose, flowing silks, holding data pads that looked as delicate as spun glass. There were alien species, the towering, multi-jointed Niveni, the squat, amphibious Krell, all moving with a sluggish, unhurried grace. Nobody was looking over their shoulder. Nobody was walking with their weight shifted to their toes. There wasn't a single blast shield on the primary viewports, just a massive wall of naked glass overlooking the tranquil blue curve of an agricultural world. Bowman rubbed his jaw. The stubble felt like wire. He looked down at his transfer orders again, the crumpled piece of flimsy plast looking completely out of place in his massive, calloused hand. Destination, Port Clement, Sector 9. Role, Conflict Resolution and Pacification, Director. Sector 9 was supposed to be a contested zone. The briefing had mentioned border friction, hostile incursions, a desperate need for veteran leadership to whip the local militia into shape. Bowman had spent 22 years dropping from orbit into meat grinders. He knew pacification. It usually involved orbital strikes and clearing rooms with a heavy repeater. He slung his canvas duffel bag over his shoulder. The bag clanked heavily. 50 pounds of armor, a stripped-down plasma rifle, and enough ordnance to level a city block. He had smuggled it past the core world checkpoints, out of sheer habit. He walked into the terminal. People parted around him like water around a stone. He knew how he looked. He was wearing faded utility fatigues, a combat harness worn thin at the edges, and a facial expression that essentially told the universe to back off. The administration desk was an open circle of polished wood, no reinforced glass, no panic buttons visible. A young human woman was sitting behind it, typing on a holographic keyboard. She looked up and offered a smile so bright it actually made Bowman's eyes hurt. "Welcome to Port Clement. Can I get your core ID, sir?" Bowman stared at her. He didn't speak. He reached into his chest pocket, pulling out a battered brass cylinder, and slammed it onto the wood. The heavy thud made the clerk jump. She scanned the cylinder. Her brow furrowed. "Mr. Bowman? Victor?" "Sergeant Major Bowman," he corrected, his voice sounding like two rocks grinding together. "Oh, my apologies, Sergeant Major. We don't get many military titles out here." She tapped a few more keys. "Let's see. Conflict Resolution and Pacification. Wow, they really sent us a heavy hitter. We've been having terrible trouble in Hydroponics Bay 4. Bowman narrowed his eyes. "Hydroponics?" "Yes." She sighed, a distressed look crossing her face. "The night shift workers are refusing to share the nutrient reclamation units with the day shift. It's gotten quite heated. Raised voices. Someone even threw a tomato yesterday." Bowman didn't blink. He waited for the punchline. He waited for her to tell him that tomato was local slang for a fragmentation grenade. She just looked back at him, earnestly concerned about the vegetables. "I'm here to build a militia," Bowman said slowly. "I'm here to train your people to hold the line until the fleet arrives." The clerk tilted her head. Hold the line against what? The union reps? 10 minutes later, Bowman was sitting in the office of the port administrator. The administrator was a Niveni named Veltric. He was tall, mostly neck and limbs, with a face that resembled a sympathetic praying mantis. Veltric poured a cup of steaming blue liquid and slid it across the desk. Bowman ignored it. "I see the problem," Veltric said, his voice a soothing, synthesized hum emanating from the translation collar at his throat. "It appears to be a clerical discrepancy. Your military occupational specialty code is 812 RC, Combat Command. Correct. Port Clement requested an 812 vet, Veltric explained gently. Civilian counseling. The request was routed through the deep core bureaucracy. A typo, it seems. You were deployed to a civilian agricultural and logistics hub. The nearest military outpost is, well, it's a 6-week slipspace jump from here." Bowman sat perfectly still. The silence stretched. The phantom pain in his left knee, where a piece of shrapnel was permanently embedded, began to throb. 22 years. He had buried friends on worlds with no names. He had held the line against biological horrors and mechanized nightmares. When the brass told him he was being reassigned to a director-level position, he thought it was a reward. A final command before retirement. Instead, he was a typo. They hadn't even checked his file. They just saw a number, pressed a button, and shipped him to a greenhouse. "Send me back," Bowman said. "I cannot," Veltric said, his mandibles clicking in genuine apology. "Your transfer is finalized in the core network. The bureaucracy moves only in one direction. Victor, to undo this would take a minimum of 2 standard years of petitions. Until then, you are technically on our payroll." Bowman looked out the window. Beyond the station's dome, vast solar sails caught the light of a distant, yellow star. Cargo haulers drifted lazily in the void, carrying grain and water. It was peaceful. It was profoundly, nauseatingly peaceful. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Bowman asked. "Well," Veltric said, steepling his long, spindly fingers. "You're the director of pacification. We have a dispute in hydroponics over tomatoes. Could you mediate?" Bowman took the job. He didn't have a choice, not really. A soldier without orders was a ghost, and Bowman wasn't ready to fade away just yet. His office was located on the 3rd Promenade, nestled between a botanical garden and a daycare for alien toddlers. The first thing Bowman did was move the heavy oak desk away from the door and shove it into the far corner, facing the entrance. He stripped the decorative tapestries off the walls to remove fire hazards. He recalibrated the lighting to cast harsh, shadowless glare across the floor, ensuring no one could hide in the corners. He requested a reinforced steel door. Administration denied it. He spent 3 days quietly replacing the hinges and installing a heavy-duty maglock he scavenged from a scrapped cargo loader. Then he went to work. The locals didn't know what to make of him. The previous conflict director had been an empathetic alien who used scented candles and deep breathing exercises to resolve workplace disputes. Bowman used a clipboard, a stare that could freeze water, and the logistics doctrines of the 4th Shock Infantry. When he arrived at Hydroponics Bay 4 to handle the tomato dispute, he didn't ask about anyone's feelings. He stood by the massive nutrient vats, crossed his arms, and listened to the day shift manager complain about the night shift manager. "They're leaving the fluid filters clogged," the day manager, a pudgy human named Thomas, whined. "It slows down our morning rotation. It's completely disrespectful." Bowman looked at the night manager. "Is this true?" "We don't have time to clean them," the night manager argued. "Our quota was bumped by 10%. Bowman analyzed the room. He didn't see a workplace dispute. He saw a supply line bottleneck. He saw an artillery squad failing to cycle their barrels because they were firing too fast, resulting in a jam. The solution wasn't therapy. The solution was efficiency. You, Bowman pointed at Thomas. Your shift starts at 0600. You will arrive at 0545. You, he pointed at the night manager. Your shift ends at 0600. From 0545 to 0600, both shifts will conduct a joint maintenance sweep of the filters. It takes exactly 12 minutes if you move with purpose. I timed it on the security feeds. If the filters aren't clean by 0601, I will come down here and clean them myself. If I have to do that, you will not like what happens next. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten them with violence. But something in his dead, flat tone conveyed the promise of absolute hell. The tomatoes stopped flying. Efficiency in Bay 4 went up 20%. For 3 months, this was Bowman's life. He treated the civilian station like a forward operating base. He memorized the structural blueprints. He walked the perimeter of the station every night at 0300, checking the seals on the airlocks. He noted the blind spots in the security cameras. He realized the station's security force consisted of 12 men and women who carried non-lethal stun batons and spent most of their shifts helping lost children find their parents. It drove him crazy. He couldn't sleep. The quiet was too loud. Without the distant thump of artillery, without the adrenaline of imminent death, his mind kept wandering back to the dirt, to the screaming, to the faces of the kids he'd left behind in the mud on Kalen IV. He would sit in his dark apartment, a glass of water in his hand, staring at the wall, feeling his heart race for no reason at all. He was a weapon locked in a padded box, slowly rusting. He tried to blend in. He really did. He bought civilian clothes, flannel shirts and denim jeans that felt entirely too soft against his skin. He drank coffee in the Promenade Cafe. But he always sat with his back to the wall. He always catalogued the exits. He always tracked the hands of everyone who walked into the room. Rachel Bishop noticed. Bishop was the head of port logistics. She was sharp, pragmatic, and one of the few humans on the station who didn't look at Bowman like he was a live grenade. She sat down at his table one morning, bringing her own coffee. "You're doing it again," she said. Bowman didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on a group of mechanics near the airlock entrance. "Doing what?" "Scanning the crowd like you're waiting for an ambush," Bishop said, taking a sip of her drink. "You know the most dangerous thing on this station is the food poisoning at the noodle stand on level 2. Complacency kills," Bowman muttered. "Victor, you've been here 3 months. You've optimized our shipping routes. You've terrified the agricultural staff into unprecedented productivity, and you fixed the life support hum in Sector B because you said it sounded like an incoming mortar. We appreciate it. But you can relax." Bowman finally looked at her. "I don't know how," Bishop softened. She reached out, lightly tapping the scarred knuckles of his right hand resting on the table. "I looked up your file, you know, the real one, not the civilian dummy file." Bowman tensed. "You shouldn't have done that." 22 years, she said quietly. 17 campaigns. 24 medals they only give to dead people or ghosts. You've done your time, Victor. You protected us. Now let us give you a place to rest." Before Bowman could formulate a response, the lights in the promenade flickered. It wasn't a mechanical failure. The flicker was a deliberate sequence. 3 short blinks. The ambient hum of the station's primary reactor dropped an octave. The soft, synthesized music playing over the public address system cut out abruptly. Bowman was out of his chair before Bishop could even register the change. "What's wrong?" she asked, startled. "Power diversion," Bowman said, his voice instantly shedding its weary edge. It was crisp, authoritative, the voice of a commander. Someone just manually severed the external communication array to route auxiliary power to the docking clamps. The station-wide alarms began to blare. Not the soft, chiming alert for a medical emergency, but a harsh, grating klaxon. Red emergency lighting flooded the promenade, washing the sterile white walls in the color of blood. The public address system crackled to life. An unfamiliar voice, heavily modulated and dripping with malice, echoed through the halls. "Attention, Port Clement. This is Captain Drecker of the Blood Iron Syndicate. Your station is now under our control. Do not attempt to access the escape pods. Do not attempt to contact the core systems. Gather in the central atrium. Anyone found hiding will be executed. You have 10 minutes. Screams erupted in the promenade. Civilians panicked, scattering like frightened insects. Bishop stood up, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Pirates? The Syndicate? They don't come out this far. We're a civilian zone." Bowman wasn't looking at her. He was looking at the main airlock doors at the far end of the promenade. He could hear the heavy thud clank of magnetic boots hitting the deck plating on the other side. He knew that sound. It was the sound of heavy boarding armor. The local security chief, a young man who looked like he had never thrown a punch in his life, ran past them, gripping his stun baton with white knuckles. He was shaking violently. Bowman grabbed him by the shoulder, stopping him dead. "Where are you going, son?" To the airlock," the kid stammered. "I have to stop them." Bowman looked at the flimsy plastic baton. He looked at the kid's unarmored chest. Then he looked back at the airlock, where sparks were already beginning to shower as the pirates hit the security seals with a plasma cutter. For the first time in 3 months, the constant, aching tension in Bowman's chest vanished. The confusion, the bureaucratic nonsense, the soft civilian world, it all melted away. The world snapped into sharp, brutal focus. This was language he understood. "Go back to the daycare," Bowman told the kid, shoving him gently toward Bishop. "Help Rachel evacuate the civilians to the lower maintenance levels. Lock the bulkheads behind you." "But now," Bowman barked, the sheer force of his command brooking no argument. Bishop grabbed his arm. "Victor, what are you doing? There's a whole crew of them. They have guns." Bowman turned away from her, walking calmly toward his office, where his duffel bag was waiting in the locked footlocker. "So do I," he said. The mag lock disengaged with a heavy, satisfying clunk. Bowman stepped into his office, the harsh overhead lighting snapping on automatically. He bypassed his desk and knelt beside the steel footlocker shoved in the corner. Thumbprint. Retinal scan. The lid hissed open, releasing the stale scent of gun oil and cordite into the sanitized station air. It smelled like home. He stripped off his flannel shirt, the cold air hitting the lattice of thick, white scar tissue across his torso. He strapped on the matte black combat plating piece by piece, feeling the familiar weight settle over his collarbones and thighs. It wasn't the pristine ceremonial gear favored by the core world military police. It was gouged and pitted, scorched by plasma fire and acidic blood. He slammed a high-capacity power cell into the belly of his rifle. The weapon whined, a low, predatory hum as the magnetic coils charged. Out in the promenade, the primary airlock finally gave way. A concussive blast rattled the station's bulkheads, followed by the screech of tearing metal. The Blood Iron Syndicate poured in. They were a motley crew of scavengers and killers, heavy worlders in rusty exosuits, reptilian skirmishers with jagged blades, and human outcasts carrying black market disruptors. They moved sloppy. They bunched up in the doorways. They shouted and cheered, high on the adrenaline of a soft target. They started dragging civilians out from behind storefront counters, shoving them toward the central atrium just as their captain had ordered. Bowman slipped out the secondary maintenance hatch of his office. He didn't run. Running made noise. He ghosted through the ventilation corridors he had mapped during his sleepless nights, his heavy boots making barely a whisper on the grated flooring. The first pirate died without knowing he was under attack. He was a massive bruiser, laughing as he kicked at the locked glass door of the noodle stand. Bowman shot him through the throat from 70 yards down the corridor. The crack of the rifle was deafening in the enclosed space. The bruiser dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. Panic ripped through the pirate ranks. They aimed blindly, firing indiscriminately into the civilian storefronts. Glass shattered. Polymer paneling melted. Bowman relocated. 3 seconds. 50 feet. He dropped to a knee behind a reinforced structural pillar. 2 alien skirmishers charged his previous position. Bowman put a burst of superheated plasma through the chest of the first, then smoothly transitioned his aim to the second, dropping him mid-stride. "Contact!" a pirate screamed into his comms. "We got local sec! Suppress the flank!" Bowman almost smiled. It was a cold, dead expression. "Local sectors." He tapped a sequence into his wrist computer, overriding the promenade's environmental controls. He killed the main lights. He plunged the entire sector into absolute darkness, save for the strobing red emergency beacons. His helmet visor dropped down, thermal imaging painting the world in stark green and white. The pirates were glowing targets, completely blind, screaming at each other in the dark. Bowman went to work. It wasn't a battle. It was an extermination. He moved with brutal, mechanical efficiency. He didn't waste ammo. One shot to the center of mass. Move, flank, shoot, move. He used the botanical garden to mask his thermal signature, stepping silently over exotic ferns as he flanked a heavy gunner. He drove his combat knife through the gap in the gunner's neck armor, lowering the heavy body quietly to the floor to avoid a thump. He remembered the kid from Kalen 4, the one he couldn't pull out of the mud in time because he was pinned by sniper fire. He pushed the memory down, feeding the icy old rage into his trigger finger. These pirates weren't soldiers. They were bullies who preyed on farmers. He cleared the promenade in 4 minutes. 14 dead. 0 civilian casualties. He stepped over the bodies, reloading his rifle as he walked toward the central atrium. Captain Drecker was furious. He stood in the massive, vaulted central atrium of the station, surrounded by his surviving men, a dozen out of an initial boarding party of 40. Drecker was a towering brute of a man, heavily augmented with cybernetic limbs that whirred and clicked with his rising temper. "Find him!" Drecker roared, his voice booming over his helmet comms. "It's one man. Tear the station apart." "You don't need to look." The voice echoed from the upper balcony. Drecker whipped his plasma cannon upward. Bowman stood at the railing, perfectly silhouetted by the distant light of a solar flare bleeding through the massive observation window. He didn't look like a counselor. Covered in soot, his armor painted with the blood of Drecker's crew, he looked like the Grim Reaper, rendered in scarred steel. "Take him!" Drecker yelled. Bowman vaulted the railing. It was a 20-foot drop. His boots hit the marble floor of the atrium with a crack that echoed like thunder, his synthetic bone structure absorbing the brutal impact. Before the pirates could even track him in the dim light, he threw a flashbang grenade. The detonation blinded the room in a searing white flash. Bowman was already moving. He slammed into the nearest pirate, using the man's armored body as a shield while he fired his sidearm into the visors of 2 others. A stray plasma bolt grazed Bowman's shoulder, searing through the plating and biting deep into his flesh. He didn't flinch. He didn't scream. The pain was just data. He dropped the human shield and charged Drecker. The pirate captain swung a massive cybernetic fist, intending to take Bowman's head off. Bowman ducked beneath the swing, the blow shattering the marble wall behind him. Bowman drove his knee into Drecker's exposed thigh, hearing the wet crunch of organic bone snapping underneath the metal plating. Drecker bellowed, stumbling forward. Bowman grabbed the back of the captain's neck, forcing his head down, and leveled his heavy sidearm directly at Drecker's temple. "Stand down," Bowman said. His voice wasn't elevated. It was terrifyingly calm. The remaining pirates froze. They looked at their captain on his knees, then at the blood-soaked human holding him hostage. "Drop your weapons," Bowman ordered. "Kick them to the center of the room. Do it now, or I blow a hole through his skull and start on the rest of you." Heavy metal clattered against marble. The pirates surrendered. An hour later, the station was secure. The surviving pirates were locked in a reinforced cargo bay, stripped of their gear and waiting for the core world authorities. The grating emergency alarms were finally silenced, replaced by the warm, standard illumination of the atrium. Rachel Bishop emerged from the lower maintenance levels, leading a group of terrified civilians. She stopped at the edge of the atrium. The floor was scorched black. Deep pockmarks from plasma fire riddled the walls. Tarps covered the bodies of the boarders, and in the middle of it all sat Victor Bowman. He was sitting on a crushed supply crate. His armor was blackened and smoking slightly. A local medic was frantically trying to bandage his shoulder, but Bowman seemed to barely notice the man probing the burn. He was staring at the floor, his face pale and exhausted. The cold mechanical killer was gone. He just looked incredibly tired. Bishop walked up to him slowly. The civilians behind her kept their distance, looking at Bowman with a mixture of profound gratitude and primal fear. They finally understood what he was. "Victor," Bishop said softly. He looked up. His grey eyes were hollow. "They bypassed the outer warning buoys," he muttered, almost to himself. "I should have seen it. I should have set a tripwire protocol on the comms array. I got lazy." "Victor, stop!" Bishop said. She knelt in front of him, ignoring the soot and blood covering the floor. She took his uninjured hand. "You saved us, all of us. If you hadn't been here—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Bowman looked past her, at the agricultural workers, the mechanics, the Niveni administrators. They were alive. Soft, unprepared, but alive. He had spent his whole life fighting for dirt and political lines on worlds that didn't matter. This was different. This was protecting people who didn't know how to protect themselves. Thomas, the day shift manager from hydroponics, stepped forward. He was shaking, holding a thermal mug in his hands. He offered it to Bowman. It's coffee, sir. Black. Like you drink it." Bowman looked at the mug. He took it with a slight nod. "Thank you, Thomas." Veltrick, the station administrator, approached, his long mandibles clicking nervously together. "Sergeant Major, I have contacted the core bureaucracy. They realized their error. When I explained the situation, they expedited a military transport to extract you and take you to the front lines. They apologized profusely for the delay." Bowman took a sip of the coffee. It was terrible, too bitter, burnt at the bottom. It was the best thing he had tasted in months. He looked around the damaged atrium, the shattered glass, the scared but living faces looking to him for direction. "Cancel it," Bowman said. Veltrick blinked. "I beg your pardon." "Cancel the extraction," Bowman repeated, his voice finding its gravelly strength again. "Tell the core bureaucracy I accept the position permanently." He stood up, wincing slightly as the medic tied off the bandage. He towered over Veltrick. "This station is full of blind spots. The security force is a joke, the blast doors need a secondary power routing, and someone left a wrench in the primary airlock path today. It's a tactical nightmare." Bowman looked at Bishop, the ghost of a real, genuine smile touching the corner of his scarred mouth. "Somebody has to fix it. Sometimes the universe makes a mistake, but puts exactly the right person in the wrong place." If you enjoyed Sergeant Major Bowman's sudden career change from frontline shock trooper to the galaxy's deadliest HR manager, hit that like button and share this story with a fellow sci-fi fan. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more original, grounded science fiction stories and hit the bell icon so you never miss an upload. See you in the next one.